Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, well, we're getting into a really complex one. A truly polarizing figure in modern true crime history. We are talking about Aileen Wuornos.
That's right. The woman convicted of murdering 7 men down in Florida. And she's someone who, as one of our sources puts it, has really entered the world's imagination and pried it wide open.
Yeah, becoming this sort of real folk hero outlaw. It's a powerful label.
And that framing, the folk hero outlaw, that's exactly where we need to start thinking about this. Because yes, the public knows the headlines, right? America's first female serial killer.
It's sensational stuff.
Exactly. But our deep dive today, it relies on something much more, intimate and chaotic. We have her own extensive letters, correspondence written from death row, mostly to a friend named Dawn.
Okay, so that gives us a pretty specific mission here. We aren't just, going over the court records again.
Yeah.
We're trying to synthesize these two really different narratives. You've got the cold, hard facts of the case, the official record, and then you have her side. Her highly personal, very defensive, and often deeply contradictory testimony about those same facts, straight from her own pen.
Absolutely. We want to take you, the listener, the true crime enthusiast, beyond just the sound bites to really try and understand how she saw the crimes, the legal betrayal she absolutely claimed happened, and that final, almost desperate spiritual journey she took.
It sounds like we have a lot of material.
We'll do hundreds of pages of her own words. And, she was often constrained by prison rules, like she could only send out 4 pages per letter.
4 pages.
Yeah, but she'd often write 20, maybe more pages a day. Sometimes you can only tell they're connected by these little sequential numbers scrawled in the margins.
Wow.
So her account, it's defined by just extreme trauma right from the start, then escalating desperation, these claims of systemic corruption, and then this final, really frantic search for some kind of spiritual absolution before her date with the electric chair.
Okay, so let's unpack that narrative. We really have to start at the beginning because the psychological groundwork, the sociological foundation for Aileen Wuornos' later life, it seems like it was laid in a childhood just absolutely marred by abandonment and extreme violence.
Yeah.
Aileen Lee Carol Wuornos, born February 29th, 1956, Leap Day, in Rochester, Michigan. And it sounds like the deck was stacked against her from the very first breath.
Oh, absolutely. The early details aren't just grim, they feel systemic, Her father, he was convicted of child molestation shortly after she was born. He later killed himself in prison.
Right.
Then her mother abandoned Aileen and her brother, just left them with their grandparents. And these grandparents were, ill-equipped is putting it mildly. They were abusive.
How so?
Friends later recalled her grandfather regularly beat her. Her grandmother was a chronic alcoholic. So you're talking about an environment of just complete instability and constant physical threat.
And this cycle, this violence, it started shaping how she survived before she was even a teenager, didn't it?
It did. She was just 11 years old when she apparently began trading sexual favors.
Late.
For money, yeah, but also just basics, beer, cigarettes, things kids might want, but also maybe things she just needed to get by or cope. It was about finding some kind of basic sustenance, maybe a temporary escape from that home environment.
It just got worse from there.
It escalated quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
At 13, she was raped, became pregnant.
13.
She gave birth at 14. That child was immediately given up for adoption. And as soon as the child was gone, the family kicked her out.
Just like that.
Just like that. It's like she survived by fulfilling this, function, the pregnancy, and then she was immediately disposable.
So by 14, she's homeless.
Completely on her own, living entirely on the road. She spent her late teens sleeping rough, in the woods sometimes, or hitchhiking, using different names.
How did she survive?
Begging, stealing, selling pills, selling sex. This wasn't like a calculated criminal career yet. It was just raw, desperate survival, day to day.
And this is where we get one of those really telling insights from her letters, right?
Yeah.
Something that connects this early experience to her whole life.
Exactly. Years later, writing from death row, she reflected on these brutal, formative years. And she used this chilling analogy, almost military-like. She told her friend Dawn she remembered sleeping in the snow, being weak from hunger.
Yeah.
And she described those nights as being like a soldier sleeping out in a battlefield, constantly on guard, hypervigilant, just expecting danger from every single direction.
Wow. A soldier in a battlefield. That analogy it's key, isn't it? It implies she wasn't living a normal life, not even then. She was always in a kind of combat zone. And that mindset, that hypervigilant survival mode, it seems like it just hardened, became a core part of her personality that really defined her adult life, even when things maybe got a bit more stable.
It absolutely carried over. Fast forward to the early 1980s, her brother had died from cancer, which was another huge loss for her. She moved down to Florida, and the pattern of survival, it's just continued. Working as a prostitute, constantly in trouble with the law. By 1991, her criminal record was already pretty extensive.
What kind of things?
Felonies, misdemeanors, illegal possession of a firearm, forgery, assault, robbery, you name it. And even the official documents, the police notes, they often described her attitude as poor.
So the system already saw her as difficult, combative.
Yeah, she was already fighting the world long before the murders.
Okay, so the narrative takes a pretty significant turn in 1986, right? That's when she met Terry Moore.
Yes. They met her at a bar in Daytona Beach. They started what Wuornos described as this really intense romantic relationship. They lived together, supported themselves through, low-level crime mostly.
And this relationship is absolutely central, isn't it? Because it connects directly to the evidence that eventually convicted her.
It's crucial. The couple, they're involved in petty crime, yeah. Specifically selling stolen items at pawn shops in Florida. And this seemingly mundane activity, it became the absolute linchpin for the murder investigations.
How so?
Police were able to trace items belonging to Richard Mallory. He was the first victim she was charged with killing. They traced his stuff to a local pawn shop using Wuornos' thumbprint on the pawn receipt.
Wow. Just a thumbprint. A simple administrative detail. That was the critical mistake.
And it wasn't just that. The police found more. They later found a camera, also from Mallory's car, inside a rented storage unit.
And how did they connect that to her?
The unit was opened with a key that was taken from Wuornos when she was initially questioned or arrested. So this established a physical, basically irrefutable link between her and the victim's possessions.
So the net is closing in. What happens with Terry Moore?
Well, as the investigation starts heating up, Moore apparently grows suspicious. Or maybe just scared. She moves north to Pennsylvania.
Leaving Wuornos behind.
Yes. And Wuornos herself was eventually arrested, not initially for murder, but on an outstanding warrant. They picked her up at a biker bar in Harbor Oaks, Florida.
Okay, and this is where the police strategy gets really interesting. And, well, according to Wuornos, highly manipulative.
Right. The authorities tracked down Terry Moore in Pennsylvania. They recognized the intensity of that relationship, the connection they had.
And they use her.
They use her to try and elicit a confession from Wuornos. This happens just before her final arrest for the murders in 1991.
So that cooperation between the police and Moore, for Wuornos, that must have felt like the ultimate betrayal.
Absolutely. It becomes this definitive point of perceived betrayal for her. It shapes so much of her death row writing. She casts Moore not just as a former lover, but as this critical agent in her downfall. Whether Moore did it willingly or, as Wuornos sometimes claimed, was coerced by the police.
Okay, so when she's arrested, Wuornos is tried for multiple murders. It starts with Richard Mallory and Troy Burris, and later others like Charles Humphreys. The prosecution's case seems pretty straightforward, right? Built on that physical evidence.
The pawned items, the storage unit key.
Right. And the simple fact that 7 men were dead. Their narrative was pretty clear. Premeditated murder by a prostitute targeting her clients, likely for robbery.
But literally the moment the police started calling her a serial killer, she launched this fierce, persistent counter-narrative. You see it all through her letters.
This is where that folk hero outlaw idea starts to take shape in her own mind.
Exactly. She claimed the cops were, quote, pissed off because she just didn't fit their serial killing scam. She insisted very strongly that real serial killers mutilate and stuff.
And her victims weren't.
She argued none of this occurred. She said the crime scenes themselves, because they lacked those, ritualistic elements you sometimes see, actually proved her case, proved it was self-defense.
Okay, let's drill down on that self-defense claim. Because the details she provides about the violence, they're pretty shocking, but they're central to her whole argument legally.
They are. Her defense really hinged on 2 main things. First, the inadequacy of her weapon.
The gun.
Yeah. And second, the sheer overwhelming violence she claimed she was fighting against.
Okay, start with the gun. What kind was it?
It was a .22 caliber pistol, and she constantly minimized how effective it was. She described it as being for shooting birds, like a BB gun.
Implying it wasn't really a deadly weapon.
Well, her argument was that against a large, enraged man, 1 shot would never do a thing. And this detail is crucial for her story, because it implies that if the men were still alive, still struggling after the first shot, then whatever she did next was reactive. It wasn't a premeditated execution.
And she gives specific examples of this.
Oh, yeah. Chilling details to back it up. She cited the incident with one victim, Charles Humphreys. She claimed he was shot at least 5 times.
5 times with a .22.
Yes, and according to her, he still had good strength still left in him. She vividly described the struggle where he almost managed to shoot her in the eye.
So she's painting this picture of just desperate close quarters combat.
Exactly. She stressed the physical impossibility, as she saw, of stopping an attacker with such a small weapon. She argued a .22 just wouldn't do shit against a big guy who's in a crazed state. So this detail, it moves beyond just general self-defense. It argues for the necessity of continuous desperate violence just to survive these life-or-death fights.
It goes back to that soldier in a battlefield mindset.
Absolutely. That hyper-vigilant survival mode was now, in her telling, violently manifest.
And this brings us to the core justification she offered, right? The reason she said she had to fight back so hard, the trauma of sexual assault?
Yes. Wuornos didn't just claim the men tried to rape her. In her letters, she described the horrific, explicit violence of rape itself, really graphic details.
Like what?
Things like, quote, penis fully erected down your throat, or attackers pulling out pussy hairs for additional pain. I mean, incredibly graphic and disturbing descriptions.
And she used this to argue.
She used this raw, graphic detail to argue that her reaction, her violence, was a necessary, maybe even a rational retaliation against that level of violence directed at her. She said explicitly about Mallory that his behavior was illegal and irrelevant to me whether he should live or die.
So she believed her acts were a direct response to sexual assault, which she felt was this constant threat in her life and not, premeditated murder for robbery.
That was her unwavering claim, self-defense against brutal assault.
But the courts, they rejected this narrative. So who did she blame for the collapse of her defense? Did it come back to Tyria Moore?
Oh, absolutely. It always came back to Tyria Moore, the person whose cooperation helped police get that initial confession. Wuornos became utterly convinced that Tyria Moore was never given a polygraph test.
Why was that important to her?
Because in her mind, without a polygraph, Tyria could just lie like a motherfucker. She even cited one specific transcript where she claimed Moore lied 49 times.
So she saw Moore as basically a tool for the state.
Completely. A disposable tool used to fabricate a narrative that fit their neat serial killer theory, regardless of the truth.
And this deep suspicion, this feeling of betrayal, it extended right into her own defense team.
Yes, and this is a really crucial point in her whole narrative of betrayal. She claimed repeatedly that her own defense lawyers rejected her request to put Tyria Moore on the witness stand.
Wait, her own lawyers wouldn't call Tyria. Why?
Well, if it's true, it is baffling legal strategy. Why would a defense team actively avoid calling a witness, even a hostile or reluctant one, who is so intimately involved, whose testimony, even if it was shaky, might have at least muddied the prosecution's claim of premeditation?
So how did Wuornos interpret that refusal?
For her, it was definitive proof. She stated it was another sign they were working for the state, not me. Plain and simple.
So she wasn't just claiming, bad lawyering or incompetence. She was claiming full-blown collaboration. Conspiracy, almost.
Yes. She even started speculating that some of the stolen items traced back to her, radios, cameras weren't just from the victims. She suggested maybe some were Tyria's, or items they both stolen together in their earlier petty crimes.
And the implication was?
The implication was that the police deliberately framed the case to link all of their shared criminal activity, everything found, directly to the murders, thereby destroying any chance she had of claiming the robberies were secondary, happening after the self-defense killings. For Aileen, the line between justice and manipulation, it was just totally erased. She believed her lawyers and the cops were working together against her. And this feeling, this profound sense of betrayal, she claimed, it started immediately, right when she was arrested. This is where her claims really shift from just self-defense to this idea of a full-blown institutional conspiracy designed to make her compliant, shut her up.
How did she say they did that?
She claimed that right after her arrest, they put her in medical lockdown. Now, she admitted she was severely withdrawing from alcohol at the time, experiencing extreme shaking, the DTs, basically. And according to her, they gave her 2 drugs. 25 milligrams of Librium and also Vistaril. And this, she believed, is where the manipulation began.
What are those drugs? Are they unusual for withdrawal?
Well, Librium, or clothiazepine, is a benzodiazepine. It is commonly used to treat severe anxiety and alcohol withdrawal symptoms, so that part isn't necessarily strange. But Vistaril, or hydroxyzine, that's a potent sedative and anti-anxiety drug. Powerful stuff.
And what was her claim about how they were given to her?
This is key. She claimed they weren't honest about what they were, that they told her they were just sinus pills or maybe mild tranquilizers that wouldn't harm her, basically something benign to get her to take them without question.
And she stayed in this medical lockdown, drugged, for how long?
For 15 days, according to her letters. Long enough, she claimed, for her to become good and hooked, particularly on the Vistral.
And her interpretation of this was?
Her account is that this was a deliberate tactic to make her compliant, maybe confused, definitely malleable, just as her public defender, a guy named Raymond Cass, arrived on the scene.
Okay, so her lawyer shows up while she's potentially impaired by these drugs. What happened then?
Well, according to her correspondence, Cass's priorities were shockingly misplaced. She claimed that instead of focusing on strategy for a capital murder case, 7 bodies, remember, the conversation immediately turned to money.
And
media rights.
Seriously, right away.
Right away. She said she was told she'd probably get life imprisonment, not death. And Cass immediately brought up a woman named Jackie Giroux, who was apparently already interested in making a movie and writing a book about her life.
How did Wuornos react to that?
Initially, she claimed she wanted nothing to do with it. She wanted to talk about her case, about proving self-defense. She believed she only deserved life because she merely defended my ass.
But Cass pushed the money angle.
Allegedly, yes. He apparently explained she'd need money during her long incarceration. And this is where we really need to touch on a critical legal detail. The Son of Sam law.
Right. The law designed to stop criminals from profiting from their crimes through books or movies.
Exactly. Named after David Berkowitz, the New York serial killer. Wuornos claimed Cass proposed a deal specifically structured to get around this law.
How would that even work?
The deal she described was this. She'd get $60 a month, like a small allowance, until the movie was completed. And then, after it was done, she'd receive a much larger lump sum, $150,000.
So delaying the big payment until after conviction and sentencing, maybe?
Possibly. And to handle all this, Cass allegedly brought in another lawyer, Russell Armstrong, who, ironically, had actually been her public defender on a previous unrelated charge. Armstrong would handle the civil side, the movie contract stuff, supposedly for free.
Did she agree to it?
Eventually, yes. She said she agreed, believing this money would somehow be protected from the Son of Sam law and would sustain her in prison. But in her mind, this just cemented the betrayal.
How so?
Because she saw her own lawyer being more interested in the movie rights, the potential $150,000 payout, than in actually saving her life or proving her innocence. For her, it was just more evidence that he was collaborating with the state, maybe wanting to wrap up the case quickly to get to the lucrative media deal.
And this feeling of being exploited, it didn't stop with her defense team.
Not according to her, no. It extended even to advocates who came later, supposedly to help her. She accused 2 people. Steve and Arlene later legally adopted her. Complicatedly enough, she accused them of eventually conning her.
Conning her how?
Into waiving off all remaining trials, which of course led directly to a sure warrant of death. She came to believe they were also working for the police. Everyone was against her, in her view.
Wow, so she's navigating this absolute minefield, constantly trying to figure out who's genuine and who's just exploiting her story.
Absolutely. And her letters show she was incredibly conscious of her public image, fiercely trying to control her own narrative, especially when it came to media interviews.
How did that play out?
Well, she spoke really highly of a BBC interview crew. Why? Because, she claimed, they let me roll. They apparently just let the camera run, allowed her to speak without constant interruption to get her version out there, however rambling it might have been.
And other media.
She complained bitterly about NBC Dateline, said they kept cutting on me, wouldn't let her finish a sentence. For her, this contrast was proof of narrative manipulation. The BBC let her chaos exist. NBC tried to shape it, contain it.
So she became very protective of who could speak for her, or even about her.
Extremely. She explicitly warned her friend Dawn, the main recipient of these letters, not to be interviewed by anyone unless she specifically approved them. Like, she gave Nick Broomfield, the documentary filmmaker, her blessing.
But others she warned against.
Oh, yeah. She singled out Geraldo Rivera, called him a snake in the grass, said he was only out for bucks, accused him of producing, quote, vile, negative, slanderous, false, and lying crap. She was basically trying to issue media control directives from death row.
It's incredible. And even efforts from potential allies like feminist groups were apparently shut down.
According to Wuornos, yes. Her own defense team allegedly discredited feminists who tried to get involved, specifically mentioning Phyllis Chesler. They apparently told Wuornos that Chesler was crazy and that trying to frame the case as a feminist issue could actually destroy your case.
So just keep it simple, keep it focused on the legal facts, maybe don't rock the boat.
That seems to be the message she received. So you see this pattern emerging in her mind. Lawyers focused on money, police focused on getting a quick serial killer conviction, the media focused on sensation.
In all of this context, for her, it explained the incredible speed of her trial.
Exactly. To understand what she called the rush to judgment, she drew this direct, really stark contrast to another huge case happening around the same time, the O.J. Simpson trial.
How did she compare them?
She stated, flat out, that the Simpson trial received the greatest in history of favoritism. Unlimited resources, endless time, massive media attention focused on every detail.
Whereas her trial...
Her capital murder trial for 7 alleged victims lasted only 13 days.
13 days for a capital case.
13 days, which led her to believe, absolutely, that she was extremely railroaded with a rush to judgment.
That speed does seem unusual for a case that complex with the death penalty on the table.
It fueled her belief that the judge himself was inherently biased against her from the start. She accused him of being cold, having a downright I don't give a shit attitude.
Did she suggest a motive for the judge?
Yeah, she believed his actions were purely political, done for re-election purposes. That he just wanted to satisfy the public's desire for a conviction and the cruelest possible sentence, regardless of whether she was telling the truth or even, as she put it, just somewhat telling the truth.
So it's this powerful, all-encompassing narrative of systemic failure, where she sees herself not just as a killer, but as a victim of a system that prioritized speed, public opinion, and maybe even profit over any kind of impartial justice.
So as her appeal started the long grind into the federal stage, and this is a process she knew could take, 3, maybe 5 years, endless legal battles, something really unexpected happened with Wuornos.
What was that?
She seemed to undergo this profound transformation, a major shift. She moved her focus almost entirely away from the legal fights, the corruption claims, and towards religion.
Huh. Was this just like a passive finding of faith or something more active?
Oh, it was incredibly active, almost like an intense scholarly pursuit. She became laser focused, she wrote, on preparing for the Lord's coming. She felt she absolutely needed to come clean.
Come clean from what? The murders, the lies she felt she told.
From the hatred, primarily, the malice she felt she carried. She wrote that she deeply feared the Spirit of God will not dwell, nor seal such a soul if it was filled with her kind of anger and bitterness.
So how did she pursue this coming clean?
She started reading the Bible, not just reading it, but studying it intensely. Specifically, the Dake Annotated Reference Bible, which is known for its extensive notes. She read it cover to cover repeatedly.
Just reading wasn't enough.
No, she was marking passages. She was actively correcting mistakes she felt she'd made in her understanding during previous readings. She was constantly debating interpretations in her letters. This level of, theological absorption. It suggests this desperate need for some kind of internal order in a life that had just been pure chaos.
And did this intense study lead anywhere specific? Did she form her own ideas?
She absolutely did. Out of all this reading and thinking, she developed this really unique, quite complex personal theology. And she shared it extensively in her letters, especially with Dawn. It seems like it was her way of trying to reconcile her incredibly violent past with this newfound desire for salvation.
What was this theology?
She started calling herself and her friend Dawn second chance angels.
Second chance angels. What did that mean?
This was her explanation for why they were here, why they had suffered so much. She believed they were originally fallen angels, angels who had maybe sided with Lucifer initially, but they were given a second chance, given human shells, put into these broken, difficult human lives.
As a test.
Exactly. As a means to prove that they didn't actually wish to follow Lucifer's rebellion anymore. Their trials on earth, all the suffering and chaos, it was their final opportunity to choose God, to earn spiritual redemption.
Wow. That's quite a framework. How did that second chance angel idea affect how she saw her own life, her relationships?
It's crucial for understanding her final decisions, especially about her execution. It was this complete psychological and spiritual reframing of everything. For instance, think about her relationships. She expressed really deep what she called sisterly love for both her friend Dawn and even for Tyria Moore.
Tyria. Even after believing Tyria betrayed her.
Yes. She even sent Teria a couple of photos of herself from prison after Teria apparently got new front teeth fixed. There was still this connection. Yet in her new religious framework, she simultaneously denounced lesbianism, the very nature of her relationship with Teria, as a royal strike against God.
That sounds like a massive contradiction.
Right.
How did she reconcile loving Teria but condemning the relationship?
It is a huge contradiction. But this theology seemed to allow her to do it. She managed to separate the sin, as she now saw it, the lesbianism she had practiced and even defended earlier, from the soul. The sisterly love, the human connection she still felt for these individuals, especially Dawn.
So the theology gave her permission to love the person while rejecting the act.
It seems that way. It enabled her to feel she was coming clean spiritually, getting right with God without having to completely deny or erase the deepest emotional connection she'd ever had in her life, a way to hold both things at once.
And this spiritual imperative, this need to come clean, how did it influence her final legal strategy? She'd been fighting the system for years.
Right. Despite all those years fighting, writing about the corruption, wanting the truth out there, the movie money, the alleged drug testimony, she ultimately shifted her legal strategy completely. It coalesced around actually waiving her remaining appeals.
She wanted to stop fighting. Why?
She decided that life imprisonment, the alternative to execution, would just be further injustice and unnecessary further torment of which I needn't deserve. That endless cycle of appeals, filings, new lawyers, it just became another form of abuse from the corrupt system she hated.
So she chose execution.
She eventually decided to waive everything, her remaining trials, her appeals. She wrote, quite starkly, "I'd rather go for a new book, a new movie, and then die. Head on home to God."
So she still wanted the story told, the book and movie, but then death.
Yeah, it's like she saw execution not as a punishment anymore, but as the final decisive exit from this corrupt, tormented earthly system she felt had trapped her since birth.
And she was serious about wanting to die.
She didn't mince words. In 2001, at her clemency hearing, she explicitly told the board she was, quote, going for 12, only got 7, so I've got 5 more to go, referring to the murders. She expressed this urgent desire for the death warrant to be signed immediately, as soon as possible.
How did she talk about the execution itself? The electric chair.
She accepted it, even described the chair as potentially being a warm welcome, stating that the moment the switch was pulled, she believed she would depart with angels waiting, as well as Jesus escorting me to the other side where life is. For her, it became the ultimate act of taking back control over her own death, and finally achieving that spiritual goal of going home.
She just did a lot to process. And throughout all this, her letters kept coming.
Oh, yeah. They provide these deep, sometimes really humanizing glimpses amidst all the theology and legal rage. She was incredibly prolific, like we said, sometimes writing 20 or more pages a day, just pouring everything out, constrained only by that 4-page mailing limit. She was constantly analyzing, sharing, trying to process her reality right up to the end.
What about her final requests? Things like her remains.
Even those reflected her feelings, especially her contempt for Florida and the system there. Initially, she had wished for her ashes to be spread in the Gulf of Mexico, but later she changed her mind. Stated flatly that she hated Florida too much, she asked for her ashes to be taken up north, back towards where she came from, perhaps.
And the execution itself. Did you want people there?
She was incredibly specific about the circumstances. She prepared to go out alone, as she put it. Refused even her adoptive mother, Arlene, a final visit. Said Jesus was her only comfort now. However,
yes.
She made one exception. She only allowed her trusted friend, Dawn, the recipient of most of these letters, and Dawn's husband, Dave, if you wanted, to attend the execution as witnesses.
Why them? Why allow anyone if she wanted to be alone?
And the reason she gave was chillingly practical, utterly pragmatic even then. She wanted them there to ensure she was actually killed.
What?
Yes, not some comatose, just to suffer in other ways. After a lifetime, as she saw it, defined by systemic lies, manipulation, being drugged, she needed a trusted witness, someone to confirm the physical act of her death, to make sure there was no more possibility of lingering torment or trickery.
So Aileen Wuornos' journey, it's characterized by this profound, incredibly early trauma, which then seemed to morph into violence fueled by sheer desperation. And it concluded with this really desperate spiritual quest, trying to reconcile her actions, her life, with all the received betrayals by the legal system, the media, maybe even people close to her.
Yeah, her singular focus right at the end seemed to be about fading out clean, as she put it, finding rest, finally.
And the power of her words, these letters. It really lies in that raw detail, doesn't it? And the unflinching picture they paint, however biased, we have to say, of a life just defined by abuse and reaction.
Absolutely. And her relentless claims of systemic manipulation, being drugged into compliance, lawyers prioritizing movie deals over her life, her absolute certainty that her entire case was corruptly tainted. That remains this unshakable central part of her final narrative. You can't ignore it.
So we've seen how Aileen Wuornos, really armed only with a pen and paper in the end, tried to seize control of her own story, her own narrative, and ultimately control over her own death sentence. You've heard her perspective, unfiltered in many ways, on what she called these corruptly tainted cases. A perspective that ultimately led her to choose execution, to choose death over what she saw as the continued torment of a legal system she just fundamentally distrusted.
And when we examine a case like this through the lens of the condemned person herself, especially someone who was clearly deeply harmed long before she became someone who harmed others, we are left grappling with these massive contradictions.
Yeah.
You have the established legal facts, the convictions, the evidence presented in court, and then you have this other reality, this specific, chaotic, intensely personal reality detailed in her letters, which she believed right to the end was the real truth.
So here's something to think about. Aileen Wuornos, the person who detailed horrific violence claiming it was self-defense. She was the same person who created this complex, almost forgiving theological framework, the second chance angel, specifically to ensure her own salvation. If that final truth she sought was spiritual peace, and she achieved it in her mind by waiving her appeals and accepting execution, how does that spiritual choice affect the weight of all the earthly corruption she alleged? Does it negate it? Does it reinforce it?
It's a tough question. What is the real truth when the condemned person herself opts for execution, arguably as an escape from the very system that convicted her? That really is the ultimate question left hanging by this outlaw narrative, something to mull over until our next deep dive.